consistency in this. We want to have as much access as possible between Europe and Asia in east-west direction and in north-east direction. Whenever we have such a large-scale interdependency, no political actor will try to take the risk, their benefit out of this economic interdependency. The best way to achieve peace is economic interdependence. And all the instruments of economic interdependency should be supported, should be strengthened in order to secure global order. And G8, G20, other organizations should be promoted, but especially G8 and more representative organization in economic sense. About cultural order, as the third important leg of global governance. Today, we have two tendencies at the same time. The spread of global culture, the uniform culture, like many people spend the same things in different parts of the world. There is a spread of the cultural norms, yes, but at the same time, if we compare to the mid of 19th century, 20th century, 1950s, 1960s, there is a big revival of cultures and civilizations in India, in China, in the Muslim world, in Africa, in Latin America. And I don't see this as a threat. We should not see this revival as a threat. The opposite. They are all essential parts of human history, human culture. Samuel Huntington's theory should end the term. This revival should be seen as a way of new interaction of humankind. And we can learn a lot from all these civilizations. And this interaction will provide a new cultural injection for the future of the global culture. Therefore, Turkey has initiated with Spain Alliance of Civilizations. And today we have 86 participant countries of Alliance of Civilizations. When we mean Alliance of Civilizations, we didn't mean only East and West, Islam and Christianity, no. Therefore, last meeting was in Istanbul, next meeting will be in Brazil. We want all the indigenous cultures, part of this human wisdom. And there, we should learn how to have multicultural coexistence. Multiculturalism is a typical character of the rising imperial structures. Roman Empire, when it was established in Rome, was pure Rome in 3rd century before Christ. But when it came to the 3rd century after Christ, it was a city of Iranians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Germans. This is typical character. If you have an order, political order, you have to accept the multicultural character of the society. We have the same thing in Ottoman system or British system. Today, the Western societies, including us, all of us, we have to be ready for multicultural character of these societies. Globalism will bring multiculturalism. This is a historical necessity. There will not be anymore pure cities in the sense of ethnic or religious characters. All of our cities will be having a cosmopolitan character, and this is healthy. Coming to this, therefore, Turkish membership to EU is important. If EU wants to be one day a real global power attraction, until now it is continental, very strong, soft continental attraction of center. But for the future, not only for Turkey, but EU has to accept this challenge of multiculturalism, this way or the other way. In the center of all big capitals of Europe, there will be multiculturalism. Even if Turkey doesn't become member of EU, that is the fact. Because of the previous political order of French colonialism in West Africa or British colonialism in India, the next stage, like Roman Empire, they will come to the center of that political order. This is what history teaches us. We cannot escape from multiculturalism. Similarly, if we become member of EU, I am sure Istanbul will be populated by many Eastern European nationalities from Poland, from Greece, because this is the character you have to accept this as a principle. Lastly, I will finish. I hope I didn't take much time. The principles of this global governance, after all these historical experiences and our challenges today, the first principle is inclusiveness. The global governance must be inclusive, all inclusive. Nobody should be excluded. If somebody excludes someone in one or a society, another one, in next stage of that society, they are being excluded. Like Nazis excluded Jews in 1940s, in 1950s, they were excluded. The philosophy of exclusion should end. Inclusiveness must be the prior principle of everything. Secondly, second principle, comprehensiveness. If you do ignore one region or one subject and focus, for example, on political solutions, political order, governance, and ignore economy and culture, or vice versa, we cannot have a solution. Our challenge is comprehensive. Because global phenomena is comprehensive, our solutions must be comprehensive. The third principle, representative, participatory representativeness. Whatever we establish should represent all the relevant actors, either in a nation state, like if you establish a new government in Iraq, if you want to have a real stability in Iraq, it should be representative. Now they have an election in January. We wish full success. Or if we want to have an international organization, it should be representative of all. The fourth principle is effectiveness. So we have to be proactive, like I gave the example of Caucasian crisis or international economic crisis. We have to be effectively responding to the crisis as a proactive or preemptive prevention of the crisis. And the last one, it should be vision-oriented, future-oriented, rather than based on historical prejudices or exclusion. We have to have the consciousness that all human beings, all humankind, has the same destiny, the same future, regardless of the issue of the problems. If it is climate change, it is issue of all of us. It is the expand of radicalism, it is or illegal immigration. These are all affect our future. Therefore, we have to have, as the basis of all these global governance, we have to have the consciousness of the common future, the common vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you. You're very interesting, and thank you for putting before us the principles of global governance, as well as the corners of the new global order, economic, political, and cultural, as you mentioned, that would require new mentality, as you mentioned. And I think we would need a new mentality in order for us to deal with all the crises that we have. In order to deal with the climate change, I think we definitely would need a new mentality. We are still away from there, but thank you very much for setting the path. Before we come to the last, or let's just come to the last speaker, I just wanted to say something, but I think we are very late, so I better don't. So I want to ask Madame Maharani Praneeth Kaur, Minister of State from India, to address us, and then we are done with the speaker.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the BLED Strategic Forum and Foreign Minister, Dr. Samuel Zabogar, for inviting me to speak at this prestigious forum. This salubrious lakeside setting brings a unique charm to the proceedings, and at this stage, I would like to congratulate the Mayor, the people of Bled and Slovenia for the achievement of the 2 medals that you announced at the beginning of this proceeding. The issue of the new global governance for the 21st century before this panel is currently the subject of an active international attention. Several global challenges confront the world today. The continuing global financial and economic crisis has unsettled practically every nation to various degrees. Working to ensure early recovery and nursing international trade and investment flows to health are urgent tasks, especially for the developing countries. International terrorism is a cruel menace and has repeatedly targeted several nations, especially my own. The fight against international terrorism cannot, however, succeed without effective international cooperation. Early finalization of comprehensive convention against international terrorism is therefore an imperative need. Global warming, climate change form another priority concern that could, if unchecked, bring enormous misery to one and all. Related in some ways is also the question of energy, food security that need to be tackled. Health, disease prevention have also shot into prominence, as we have found that certain infectious diseases, such as the H1N1, can travel at great speed across continents. All issues that I have mentioned should not, however, obscure the imperative need for both the elimination of poverty in developing countries and their rapid socio-economic development. This continues to remain a primary challenge. How do we confront all challenges that I have referred to in addition to addressing issues of peace, security that affect many regions of the world? Do we have the requisite political and institutional structures for that? It is pertinent to recall here that in the recent summit of the G5 leaders, consisting of Brazil, China, India, Mexico, and South Africa, held on the margins of the G8 meeting in Italy, the G5 leaders declared the world needs a new global governance, the construction of which must be based on inclusive multilateralism, which has already been spoken about. The post-war World War II world ushered in the United Nations and its various agencies, as well as the Bretton Woods twins, the World Bank, and the IMF. It is, however, more than 60 years since they came into being, and the world has changed a great deal since then. Multipolarity is the growing trend. There are new and emerging power centers that include the developing countries, which must play a larger role. Working to make the UN Security Council more representative of developing countries in both categories of membership would significantly enhance the effectiveness of this important body and the UN as a whole. Regrettably, we still do not have closure on this important issue. The world financial crisis that originated in the US has now enveloped every nation. Flowing from this crisis, there are many lessons to be learned for improving future global governance. How did these toxic assets build up in the first place? Is the world adequately regulating some of these innovative financial products? How do we tackle the long-standing fragilities and imbalances that have been highlighted by the crisis? Importantly, the crisis has given a new dimension to the work of the G20, which includes the major developed and developing country economies. The two meetings of the G20 summit have seen them pledge to strengthen regulations, improve supervision, reform international financial institutions, and substantially increase resources available with the IMF, revive trade finance, reject protectionism, and build recovery. Over the medium term, the fulfillment of these pledges must also improve global economic governance and put in place a reformed international financial system and architecture. The successful completion of the Doha round of trade negotiations would also provide some fresh momentum. India will be hosting an informal meeting of trade ministers later this week to see how best we can make progress. What we need to ensure is that the outcome remains faithful to the Doha mandate, which placed the interests of developing countries at the heart of the negotiations. For a country such as India, where over 60% of our population is directly dependent on farm income, this is critical. Over 90% of our farmers are marginal farmers, for whom agriculture is not a trade, but pure livelihood. Climate change is another area where the treaty structure already exists. What we need to do is lay down a long-term vision and a plan of action for the period beyond 2012. Equity should be a key consideration here, in line with the agreed principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. Both mitigation and adaptation need to be focused upon, and the requirement is for additional transfer of resources to developing countries and the transfer of technologies at affordable costs to these countries. Nor can we, on this issue, sidestep the burden of historical responsibility for today's greenhouse gas emissions. Sadly, the commitments undertaken by developed countries in terms of emission reductions under the Kyoto Protocol are unlikely to be met. In India, the government has accorded high priority to tackling climatic change, and we have set up 8 national missions dealing with various subjects relevant to climate change. In recent years, we have been able to deliver a 9% annual growth in GDP, with only 4% growth in energy use. While every effort is being made to reduce carbon dependence, at this stage, delivering development to our deprived populations, we are in no position to take any emission limiting commitments. In our case, our per capita emissions remain one of the lowest, at only 1.1 tons per capita against 20 tons per capita in the US and 9.5 tons in the EU, or 9.8 in Japan. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, has already stated that at no stage will India's per capita emissions exceed those of the developing nations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, any new system of governance, global governance for the 21st century, would need to address the issues that I have raised in a coherent and effective manner. Any new system that we put in place must also be built into it flexibility to change as the world continues to evolve. We cannot put in place a new system that will once again be written in concrete for another 6 or more decades. We need to be imaginative and think creatively. Hopefully, the series of crises that confront the world today that have had the necessary salutary effect to make us think and work together without the overhang of the past, of balance of power, and theories of sphere influences. The world is now simply too integrated and too small for us to go our different ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we are opening the floor for a discussion. We were not very self-restrained in our introductory remarks, but I think it was worthwhile to listen to all the discussions, and I think was a great discussion. If this discussion is an indication of what is coming up in the next 2 days, I think we are going to have a great forum, which we don't doubt. I think we have a request for a short introduction from Mr. Mike Gapes, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Commons from the United Kingdom. I'll give him the floor.
Is this working?
Yes, now it
okay.
is.
Thank you very much. Can I, first of all, congratulate the organisers on behalf of all the participants here and also the panel. I would just go back to what was said about the 65 years since the Bretton Woods and the San Francisco and the London meetings that established the current international system. There were many proposals there which were stillborn. For example, Article 42 talking about a military committee of the United Nations. Also, there were the proposals that led to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have seen in recent years a shift within the UN system from the Human Rights Commission to Human Rights Council, but in practice, there is a great deal of disappointment about how that is working. And what my question is, in this new world that we are moving to, with the economic and political focus shifting away from the power of the countries which established the universalist values written by Eleanor Roosevelt in the 1940s, can we be confident that the new world order that might be created will keep those universalist values in terms of equality of men and women and human rights?
Thank you. Is there somebody from the panel who wants to address that question? I would say we have to be confident that it's going to be that way. I think my colleague spoke about new mentality. I think we would need a new level of consciousness actually to solve the problems that we have. When I was listening, I remember the talks I had with Mrs. Sunita Williams, who is a Slovenian Indian astronaut, American astronaut of Slovenian Indian ethnic background. And she was explaining that when she was out in the space, and she stayed there for 6 months, and she was looking down on the planet Earth, and she said it's so beautiful and so fragile, all blue in all this darkness, that you just want to, you forget all the borders, you forget everything, you just want to take it in your hands and protect it from all the darkness and everything that's out there. And she was very emotional, and it seems that all the astronauts who come back feel that globalness and global responsibility that we talked about for the whole planet. That's something that I think my colleague spoke about, new mentality, when we would feel the same, when we feel that the planet is the place where we live and everybody is the same. So I remember that, and I think that fits into what you were saying. I think Jean asked for the floor first, and then Ahmed.
Yes. I just wanted to say that this question is a very, very good question, and a question that is a question that is depassing, let's say, the national interests of also the big countries. And you and myself, Samuel, our Czech colleague, not yet our Turkish colleague, we are a member of a union called European Union. So I think we have to show in the next 2 or 3 months, really, if we are able to give an integrated response to what we need in the European Union and come to an end with the discussion about Lisbon. That will be a first very, very, very important step, because a lot of countries in all the continents of the world, they look what is happening in the European Union. And there we can give an example that this global vision, as you mentioned, is not only an addition of national interests, but it is more. And so let us try to do this step together.
Thank you. Ahmed?
Thank you. It's a very important question, and it's a question of continuity and change. Of course, when we say that there is a new paradigm of international financial, economic, political, cultural order, we don't mean that all the old wisdom would be left out. the universalistic character, the universal values should continue, of course, and should be defended by this new, by the founders of this new paradigm. But what will be happening? We will rediscover some of the previous wisdoms as well. I remember the Chief Seattle's letter, Indian chief, to American president when Americans wanted to buy the land of the Indians. And if you read that letter, it was seen at that time, it is an old tradition. But if you read it today, it is the best declaration of environmental consciousness, that all the environment doesn't belong to these. If you want to, he says, you are asking me to sell this, my land, but how can I sell this nature which I do not belong it? So just this a good example, from traditional values to modern values, to modern structures, certain values disappear, certain values continued. Similarly now, from transition from modernity, all these institutions today, they are modern structures, but we are on the eve of a global age. From modernity to globality, there will be a need of change of the paradigm. But some basic dimensions of human wisdom, of modernity, like human rights, like many other really big contributions of modern culture, should continue, but in a new form, with a new structure, with a new system, and in a more integrated philosophy of different cultures, different corners of the world, let me say. So the balance between change and continuity is very important, and it should be kept when we are trying to reform institutional organizations.
Thank you. I think I would, well, if there is another question, I can take one short question. But otherwise, I would, unfortunately, I would have to close this panel. Okay, I gave one more floor, and then I'll have to close the panel. I think we have 2 days, so everything that was raised during this panel, we can continue discussing at other panels as well.
Good afternoon. Alec Worson of Glasgow Caledonian University in Scotland. Could I ask the panel, given the topic is about redefining economic geopolitical landscapes, a lot's been said about the past, a few about a vision from the future. Could I have a quick view from the panel, please, on have the measures that have been taken by the institutions we're talking about, are they working? What would have happened had the trillions that have gone in to try and correct the economic crisis, had they not been pumped in, what would the situation be today? And do the measures that global leaders are taking today, do you think they have changed some of the reckless behavior that many would agree have brought us to the mess that we are in today? Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody wants to go ahead? I think what we discussed, and I think many members of the panels raised it, is the effective multilateralism. I think we spoke a lot about multilateralism, commitment to multilateralism, but we spoke about effective multilateralism. I think that it was pointed that I think we do agree that multilateralism or international institutions not necessarily function the best. That they didn't function the best maybe during this crisis. Also about the climate change, one could say that the whole momentum started outside of the UN before it was brought into the UN. So of course we can agree that there are many flaws in function of the international institutions. We are talking about the reform of those institutions. I think everybody mentioned the reform of the political institutions and economic institutions. But nevertheless, it's still, these institutions are the ones that are inclusive. These are the institutions that everybody participates. And when you have a global crises that we have now on all fields, you also need global institutions to solve them. I think you need global response, as some members were saying here. So I think that, of course, we'll have to go, and many people said that, we'll have to go into changes. I think that also my colleague spoke about new order, economic, political, and cultural, that would also need new or or reformed institutions. I think I also had a question whether we need to reform or whether we need new institutions. I think these are the debates that we can continue. But still, it's international institutions that have to be at the core of discussions. I would, if there's nobody else, I would really apologize and I would close this discussion. And very briefly, I would go through saying that I think we'd have an interesting discussion. It will make us think about it. We went through the whole multilateralism, revitalization of it, and importance of it for everybody. I think we talked about global responsibility that brings to global institutions, about the need to reform of those. I think we talked about regional institution, about regionalization and the relation between regional institutions and the global institution. That's something to look into. I think we raised the issue of bigger and small states, of the members of the G20 and those that are not. We talked about the interaction, what is the G20 and what actions are, what can they do, and what is to be left to the multilateral institution. I think there's an interesting debate that probably will be open up, will be continued to discuss. I think we talked about the new mentality, new level of consciousness that we would all need in order to solve the crises that are multiplying. And I think we had an interesting presentation on political, economic, and cultural order and the need of change, and of course, the principles of global governance. I think that was very useful as a start of discussing or to trying to focus what could be the principles that would lead the global governance. So I think these were some of the points that were made at the panel. I want to thank all the panelists for participation and for their efforts, for their contributions. Now we have to conclude it, the first panel, and we will, I think we will restart here in 5 minutes for the special panel, Europe's Security Structure, a time to rethink. And I would kindly ask you to stay in the hall as we resume obviously in a few minutes, and I would ask Dr. Fraser Cameron to continue with the program. So I'm closing this panel. Thank you very much for participation.